Hi everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to be talking about a book called The Whiskey Sea by Ann Howard Creel. I got it on my Kindle through Amazon Prime Reading, so it was like free for me to read. And I just want to talk about my thoughts on it. This is basically a book review on The Whiskey Sea. I got done reading it today this morning actually, and the book as a whole surprised me. So this video is gonna have some spoilers in it, but I will try my best not to get rid of or tell you more about the book in detail. So basically this book starts off by introducing the characters. We have Frida, Bee, and Silver. Those are our three people we start off with. So Frida and Bee, this book talks about mostly of Frida because the book is in her point of view. They are sisters and they are adopted by Silver from the death of their mother, and they become his. So fast forward years ahead, Frida finishes high school and she's graduated, and Silver decides to throw her a little party, and literally all it is just Silver, Bee, Frida, and this guy named Hicks, or she calls him Hicks, who is a family friend, and they celebrate her graduating, and Frida tells Silver there that she doesn't want to go and continue her schooling. She doesn't want to go to school for secretary school, I believe it was. She wants to get Silver's boat and start fishing. That's what Silver does. He is, I believe, a clam fisher, him and Hicks, so she wants to be able to work on his boat. Her idea was to have Silver's boat and make a living off of that, but Silver sells his boat to Hicks and she never gets that opportunity. And from then on, she's upset with Hicks for taking what she believes was her boat and using it. And she is mad at Hicks for a while, but then they end up becoming friends again. And Hicks shows her a lot on how to fix a boat, keep up a boat, and basically teaches her how to become a mechanic on boat engines. No, she asked him to help her learn about the boat, and in a way he teaches her to become a mechanic on boat engines. And so her and Hicks, they do their thing for a while, and eventually through the prohibition, this thing called rum running shows up. And basically what that does is a bunch of people get on boats and they go to the middle of the sea where they do deals with people from Canada to get their alcohol. A lot of it is rum and whiskey, and that is how they bring in illegal contraband, the alcohol, into America. And so Frida decides to go ahead and do this because there's a lot of money there. Throughout this time of her learning how to become a boat engine mechanic, Silver ends up having a stroke and becomes sick, becomes paralyzed in half of his body, and isn't able to work anymore. So Frida becomes the breadwinner. She has her younger sister who's still going to high school, and she's like, I need money. I need to get it quickly. And so she decides to go into rum running, which is highly illegal during the prohibition. And so she ends up getting this job working on a boat engine for this guy named Dutch, and it's him and another guy, Rudy. They are this little crew who are gonna do rum running. And so the book progresses throughout the years of Frida rum running for about 2 years. It's just them three doing rum running. She's making a lot of money. She's able to save for a nurse for Silver. She's able to save to put Bee through college whenever that time comes, because she wants to send her into the city, New York City, to go to school. And so she does that. She gets all her money, and throughout the time, more people are showing up to the Bay Area to get their hands in rum running because, like I said, it's making a lot of money. There's this guy she ends up meeting who she calls Princeton. Everyone calls Princeton because he is this high well-rounded man who is in college, and he just looks like that, right? And so she meets Princeton. Turns out he ends up going to work for Dutch. And so, long story short, it's these three men and Frida who are running. And throughout their time, they're collecting all this illegal contraband. She's making tons of money, saving up, and working during the night. She and Princeton end up, sorry for the camera moving, but anyways, her and Princeton end up developing a relationship. And, she herself has a bit of, what's the word, like hesitation with this relationship because of who she is. She's a lady, a young one, who is running, which is seen as a male job. Not a lot of women are doing this, or even running boats, or being a boat engine mechanic. She is just her and B and Silver. Her mom, they touch a few that she was the town's whore, not my words. She was a sex worker. And so her mom ends up dying, right? And she has all of these feelings of like, oh, Princeton can never love someone like me because of who she is and what she does. And throughout the story, it progresses to Princeton, who we find out his real name is Charles. They end up, like, he ends up reciprocating these feelings back to Frida. And so it tells the story of their relationship, right? And how it's growing and how Frida feels. But Princeton / Charles, I'm gonna call him Charles from now on, doesn't really see the relationship the same way as Frida sees it. He sees it as like a fling. There's no love. It's just a summer fling. Yes, he's doing all these things for her, taking her to the city, showing her these new experiences. And Frida's like, oh my God, like, who is this man? Why is he doing this? I'm like developing feelings for these. And throughout that time together, she's slowly trying to figure out who Charles is, who he really is as a person, and how he sees this relationship prospering, if he does. And you know it's just a lot of back and forth between them running and Frida and Charles's relationship, right? At this point, that is what the book's main focus is. And so far it seems good, right? Like everything's on the up and up for Frida and Charles and the relationship. Well, there comes a turning point in the book where it's time for B to go off to college. And so B sits her down and was like, I want to go to the city early before semester starts. And she's like, I want to get used to the city. I want to find a place to live. I want to see how it is and if I like it. And Frida's like, I don't know. But B ends up convincing Frida and they go. And she leaves B in the city preparing for school. And so she comes back, she's continuing running. Now there are talks of gangsters and pirates invading running boats to collect contraband and to collect money. Along with that, they also have the Coast Guard after them because, once again, it's during Prohibition and it's illegal. And so, yeah, they're doing all of this. It's a high-risk job, but she is so engulfed in it because she loves the scene, she loves getting the money, but she's also engulfed in her relationship with Charles. And then tragedy struck and Silver ends up dying. He dies from his poor health, from the stroke, and yeah, now it's just B and Frida. So they end up holding a ceremony, or a funeral service, I should say, for Silver. And so, like, everyone comes and supports Frida and B and gives their condolences for Silver. And at this point, like, Frida kind of knew Silver was dying because she was like taking care of him for like the last couple of weeks. And at that time, she's trying to send word to be like, hey, this is what's going on at home. You should come home. Remember Hicks? Right. He's still in the story. Hicks ends up going to get B from the city and she comes with another man. Turns out her and this man are engaged. She tells Frida after the services. Frida has a fight with B because she's like, you're not going to want to get married to this man. You're not going to go to school. Like, what are you doing? And B's like, it's my life. I want to live how I live it, but I'm not going to school. And I'm marrying this man. And so B and this man go off back to the city, and it's just Frida and Charles, you know. Frida's staying at Charles's place because she doesn't want to live in the house that Silver died in at the moment, because it's just going to be her, right? And so her and all the other guys are still doing rum running, and, you know, there's a bunch of talks of pirates coming in. There is a bigger crackdown on rum running boats from the Coast Guard, and the town is infiltrated by gangsters as well, trying to get their hand into it. And so Frida hears all of this talk, right? And she kind of contemplates about like finishing, because she's had these talks with Rudy of like he said he was going to be finished at the end of the summer. He's got what he's needed to help his family, and he's going to be out, right? And Frida's like thinking the same thing, like, it's just me and B. I have her set up for school, so I thought maybe she'll change her mind. Am I good? You know, it's getting more riskier than what she thought. And so during this time, there was an incident where there was a rum running boat goes out to sea, and they end up getting caught by what they believe were pirates, and they sunk the ship, burn all evidence. Everyone aboard was dead, considered dead, right? And so this kind of knocks some sense into Frida and Charles as well. It's like, should we even be doing this if this is going to be an outcome? And Frida has this like internal fight of like, yes, I want to do this because I need the money, but it's also very risky. Do I want to continue the risk? Long story short, her and Charles go back to Dutch and Rudy to continue rum running. And the story at the end turned into a focus of one single night, where everything going to the boat with all of the alcohol on it was smooth sailing, you know. Frida was doing her thing with the engine, Rudy was doing his thing being a lookout, Charles was there for help, you know, and Dutch was steering the boat. Everything was good. On their way back, they noticed a spotlight on them. Turns out it was pirates. Pirates did this thing where they would put a spotlight on the boat that they were going to attack to tell them like, hey, I'm coming after you. No fear whatsoever. And so Dutch is trying to outrun these pirates. But the thing was, his boat is heavy, full of contraband, alcohol. I like saying the word contraband. So they end up deciding, like, okay, we got a fast boat. Frida freaking did her thing with the engine. And part of making the engine more powerful was getting new, what are they called? Carburetors, and adding what they called naphtha, something like that. I'll put the word. It's basically fuel for the engine, but it's very flammable. And it's supposed to help the carburetors work faster, in turn making the engine go faster. And the downside is it's very, very, very flammable, and engines heat up. So if the engine is too hot, the thing goes kaboom, because it is flammable gas. And so all four of them are kind of going back and forth, like, what should they do? Should they set up booby traps to get away from them? Should they outrun the ship? Should they go to shore and hopefully the pirate ship run out of fuel, because they kind of have a little bit more fuel, they think? Or should they just throw everything off board, make the boat lighter, and in turn go faster? There's all of this talk, and, you know, they try to lose the pirate ship. So they take a turn towards a different shoreline, and they think they lost the pirate ship because the spotlight moves away from them. They were wrong. The spotlight comes back, the pirate ship found them again, and they're like, damn, okay. So then they try to do their next thing, which was set up booby traps. And they set up a couple, they threw them out to shore, and Rudy's like, this better work, because we have nothing else, really. And so, or no, before that, they throw off all of the contraband, all of the alcohol. They throw it off, make the boat lighter, still didn't work. And so then they set up those booby traps. And then they thought it worked, because, again, the spotlight went away. And it was away for a while, and they're like, okay, good, like, we're safe. Turns out they weren't. The pirates came back with their spotlight and shined it on their boat again. The poor Pauline, right? And so they're like, okay, what do we do next? And everyone's just going back and forth, back and forth. At this point, reality sets in. Like, they're going to end up dying, just like the boat that they heard of before. They're going to end up dying. All of the risk, was it worth it? And Frida at this moment in time is she's kind of freaking out because, like, pirates are after them. They know they got weapons that they can use, rifles that they can shoot and kill them with, like they've done with plenty of other people before. Like, they are not afraid. And she's kind of freaking out. Charles is freaking out. Rudy's freaking out. Dutch is freaking out. Everyone's freaking out. And they just don't know what to do. Like, they have no more options. And then Dutch was like, oh my god, the engines, the nathanol. I honestly don't remember what it's called. And he's like, Frida, go and put that in the engines now. And Frida was like, I can't because it's too hot. The engines are way too hot for that. It's going to explode. And Dutch is like telling her, go do this right now. And at that point, she kind of loses her balance because Dutch is going way too fast and she ends up hitting something. And it kind of like makes her head spin. Her nose is bleeding. She's like freaking out, like, oh my god, what just happened? And then she's trying to fight with Dutch, like, no, I can't do this because of the engines. They're way too hot. And at that point, she realizes, where's Rudy? Like, Rudy isn't anywhere near everyone else. And at that point, she goes and finds Rudy, and he is pouring that flammable chemical into the engines. And at that point, she's like, no! And Rudy does it anyways, pours it in, boom, a blast, right? Everything goes flying, people go flying. The Pauline is up in flames. It is no more. It is sinking down to the ocean. And we kind of get a bit of a pause in the book, right? And then it comes back with Frida. She is submerged into the water, into the sea, a couple feet down. And she's like, oh my god, what just happened? And so she is trying to swim up to the surface, and she does. She ends up swimming up to the surface, and she's like freaking out. And the first person she wants to find is Rudy. She's like, oh my god, Rudy, because the last image she saw of him was him going up in flames. So she's searching, and she's like calling out for Rudy, right? Like, Rudy, where are you? And she ends up finding him, and she doesn't know if he's alive or not. And so she like holds on to his body, and she's trying to swim far away from the damage of the ship. And so she's swimming, and she ends up meeting Dutch. Like, Dutch is alive, and Dutch is like telling her to calm down, stop screaming, stop yelling, we're together, let's get a move on, because if not, these pirates are gonna come and kill us. And he's like, they didn't take my boat, but they can take us. And so it's her, Dutch, and Rudy, them two holding up Rudy's body, because they barely know if he's alive or not. And so they are swimming towards the shore, and it takes them a while. But then she's like, oh my god, where's Charles? And she sees Charles swimming away. Didn't even see if all of them were okay, didn't even call for them, nothing. He's swimming on his own. And she has that realization of like, Charles was never worth it. He left us to die. And I was like, thank you for having that realization that he was never a true man to his word. Even though I don't really know if technically we got his word, because he was like, I don't know about this. But anyways, so they swim to shore. They end up making it, surprisingly. In the dead of night, they get Rudy to the hospital. News reports that all four of them are alive. So she knows Charles survived. Flash forward a couple weeks, and it turns out Rudy is blind, and Frida feels guilty. She has all of this guilt built up in her, and she ends up giving all of the money that she's collected and gives it to Rudy and his family. She makes amends with Hicks because they had a bit of a falling out with her doing rum running. Makes amends with Hicks, and she ends up going to make amends with B because she felt guilty of the fight that she had with her involving her schooling and her marriage. and she ends up making her way to Charles's family's house, and she wants to know basically what had happened out there, like what happened between them before and after that explosion. And so she goes to Hicks and they talk, and he basically was like, I'm so glad he came to me, like, are we still on? Do you want to come in? We can talk about things. And she was like, no. She said, no, 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 no. And at that point, she kind of got her confirmation of like, Charles never seeked her out after the explosion. Charles never helped her out during the explosion. And Charles never gave any confirmation of like what kind of relationship they were in. So she said no, and she said goodbye. And I said, yes, you go, girl, because he wasn't worth it. And so the story ends of her realizing all of this, and she ends up going to Hicks and Silver's boat, which is now Hicks. Well, it was Hicks, but she goes to the boat that she grew up on, and it ends with her realizing that she can have a potential relationship with Hicks, but that's not what she wants right now. She wants to focus on herself, figure out what her life entails now since everything, and try to make something of herself. And it's just the way it ended made me feel happy, because it was true to who Frida was as a person, of like, now I get to focus on myself. I focused on everyone else, now I get to focus on myself. And I think it was a really well told story. The beginning was a little bit slow, but it really eased you into the drama it takes place. There were a lot of ups and downs, a lot of like curves that I didn't know were gonna happen, because I felt like I already knew it was gonna happen because of how slow it was in the beginning. But that's not true. It took a whole, like, there were a bunch of little things that I was like, oh my god, that happened, and oh my god, like, this happened. It like freaked me out, especially with Bee's character of her not going to school and getting married. That's not how it was like set up, but that's how it was set up in Frida's mind, you know, of who she thinks her sister was. And all of the tells of relationships I think were really well done, and overall just a really good book. So if you're like interested in an easy read of a book, The Whiskey Sea is like really, really good. I finished it. It took me a while to read, but I feel like someone can finish it in like 2 days. It's that easy. But yeah, that is my book review, or like book tale / my thoughts on it. It's a really good book. I would recommend it to everyone who wants to like have a nice easy read. It really taught me a lot of like rum running, because I didn't even think that was a thing. Like, I know prohibition was a thing, and I knew people were like sneaking alcohol, but I didn't really see the sea as an option. I don't know why. But it really like gave good information of like what rum running was and the dangers of it, and like people's thoughts on money and risk, which I found very interesting. So yeah, that are my thoughts on The Whiskey Sea, and yeah, I'll see y'all guys in a new video.